You have.
I know, I always look at it. But I feel like I do it with a lot of like I want to
You okay?
It's a good thing. So bounce off the ladder and drive. The photo from that. Remember when we went to the architecture thing? I love them. Oh, really? Oh, she got the, and she went to see it. She got with the showroom, all that. With all the,
What's that?
How many more groups do we have?
2 years ago. Oh, wait, you're with me.
like more.
Oh. Oh, you got the hair.
Try watching this website and I checked it on YouTube.
Oh, you have that too?
That's his web, IS. And like type in whatever topic you're interested in.
Did she say anything about giving it to him? Giving back to you? Oh, she hasn't.
Because I wasn't here. I mean, I did when she said I was.
I wonder why.
That's not what you said to me in that theater.
Oh, you made So you got your mother was going Yeah, she said
I was curious. I was curious. Watched the numbers. Which was 370,000. 250 hotels. I think it was 336,000. It's coming up to 45 gross.
In my mind.
45 million gross. Of course, that's so it just gives you an idea. Per year.
No, not me. I'm saying that's what it is. That sounds good.
No. I like how you're digging in.
Which one of these drives looks like your materials coming up?
Well, now that can just go to school. Realtors we say. See, it makes it look like we're really he says it's really SWAT. He doesn't want to show necessarily. He's not going to show. But you show us your rent. By the way, next door, I was doing a fair at you. You're not going to mention the rest of Well, we are. We're looking at this. What we're going to do is we're developers.
The ability to try to focus on the
Class A.
that's my bond funded tip. It's like it's not a finance one.
But is it in their kind of corridor? Is this, how old is it? You're 15 years old?
Like it
Which is fine.
I don't know what I'm doing.
That's one reason why we got to do it.
yeah, but I don't know, I don't know that one.
It's kind of a
Yeah, we can do it right after our presentation. Just email it to you.
They make more, 250 units of hotel make more than
Right.
they make 4-story
But it's not that many.
annually, and that's just river. We're gonna go through food.
Everything's right here for you.
What do you think of retails? Color county is like, if the office rents for 45 square foot, first of all, those stores are in Miami. And they're talking well, I asked for 50,000 euros.
Right.
I'm just curious for your 35,000.
There's no.
Like what the what city was charging? We're going to be on the street. We're very visible.
Okay, I don't know if you're missing or anything going.
Nothing. Like I hear like you're.
Everybody, shut down. You're on.
All right, thank you, Professor. Good morning, Professor. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
We are the Conquistador group, and our group consists of J.P. Johnson and Carol and myself, and we're going to be talking about the Brickell City project, which is right downtown Miami. And I'm not going to steal my partner's thunder, so I'm going to hand it off to J.P., who's going to give you a little bit of an intro, background, history, and then Carol will pick up and talk about the land use, legal, zoning aspects, and I will close out talking about some analysis and summarize the project and field some questions. So with no further ado, J.P.
Thank you, Claudia. Well, we visited actually this property. The first day we got the assignment, we made a little field trip. I went down and looked at the property, and it's an amazing project. It is. I'll just go over the high-level stuff and the project description, the stats, the economic impact on the Brickell City Center, and the key players involved. The description: Brickell City Center is approximately 9.1 acres along South Miami Avenue between 8th and 6th Street. 5 million square feet of office, residential, hotel, retail, and entertainment space. It incorporates key transition centers with the Miami Metro Mover, which is also the 8th Street station. The project stats. Shopping center, approximately 565,000 square feet of shopping center. 260,000 square feet of office space in 2 towers, 780 condominiums in 2 office, 2 towers, 263 hotel rooms, 89 service apartments, and approximately 2,600 parking spaces. Economic impact. The economic impact is approximately $1.1 billion. Over 1,700 construction jobs average per year for the 4 years of the project. Directly 3,700 direct jobs and 2,500 indirect jobs after the construction completion. To the city, 5.4 million in ad valorem taxes, and an average revenue of $1 million with parking surcharges for the city of Miami. So it's going to bring in a lot of money for the city of Miami. The key players involved. The developer is Swire Properties, which is a subsidiary of the Swire Holdings Limited base, which is a Hong Kong-based development firm. Also, the city of Miami is a major development partner, and the Simons Group and Whitman Family Development, those guys are taking the retail project and actually getting all the clients. I think recently in the South Florida Business Journal, there was an article saying that the Whitman Group and Simons actually have 20 new high-end stores signed up ready for the project. And all this has been done within approximately 4 to 5 years. We went there about 3-4 weeks ago, and I think there was at least 75% completed, which was great. Now we'll have Kyle to take us through the rest of the. Actually, no. Sorry. So this is the this is the land, the outline of the 9.1 acres. That's more detail of where exactly it's going to be situated, and that's the towers that they spoke about. So just in a rough overview, which Claudia's going to wrap up in the summary as far as details. And Cal will be next.
Okay. The Brickell Center is a perfect project, and it doesn't conform to what typically a developer would encounter. A typical project has the active community involved and all that. That will be missing somewhat from the Brickell project. And they say he who has the goal makes the rules, and plus if there's a need. So we have 3 presenters, and we want more or less for the Brickell story not to overwhelm the whole idea of what redevelopment normally entails. Okay. So there is identifying the parcel and then identifying the project. Brickell, the lots were 5 contiguous lots, you see the L shape, and what we were faced with, that these were zoned restricted commercial. It was fenced off between 2 transit areas, and not much was being done downtown there. And they came in and they proposed spending $1.2 billion. What do you think the impact that would be for the city? And so what I did was to identify what legal elements, what constitutional elements, what case law supports the city being able to do what it did without going through the typical due process that you'd find. So coming through, if you have a project and it conforms with what the zoning is, of course there's no problem. And say if you have a project, for example, it doesn't conform and it's not compatible with the area, do you think a project like that could get rezoned? Case law says yes, and in this particular case we had a suburban area sprawl, and the nearest shopping area was quite a few miles, quite a distance from the area. And this developer proposed putting in a pharmacy, a bakery, and hair salon and a couple other things, and the city said no. And when it was challenged, and the court rules yes, even though something doesn't conform and is incompatible, if this is the case, the city has the power to change, the local body has the power to change and to make something if it's going to be compatible with what the public welfare, because those who live there had to go some distance to get bakery stuff, to get pharmaceutical goods and so forth. So coming into the situation now, the project we had was incompatible with the current zoning. It was compatible, however, with the adjacent uses. It was beyond the scope of the current master plan. Nothing like this existed at the time down there. So I'm showing you different elements. And then it came here. However, the Brickell project advanced the vision of the future land use for downtown Miami. Was there data to support? The Swire Group spent a lot of money making sure they had the traffic flow, the economic impact, and they did a lot of background work. They used local people on the ground, because to start out, they were going to show overwhelmingly that everything supported having this project, because they were going to change the whole paradigm. So they applied for special zoning, and they applied for what is known as a special area plan. Now, if you're a parent and you could know exactly what your child is going to look like, you could choose the genes, you could put everything you wanted, this was what Brickell represented. The ideal project, everything that the developer could want was in this project from up front. And I wanted to show that constitutionally, yes, if all of these things align, it is within the power of the local and the county and the state to give this much approval and to work with them, because it did advance economically, aesthetically, and all the different elements that it was for the advancement, better economic impact. The power to rezone, and I cited here, the power to rezone and include because it advanced reasonable conditions, and so they grant them. So now, here we have a developer who's going into a project, and they literally had built into their agreement in the special area plan, the SAP, this was saying up front, between the city and the developer, what are the terms and conditions. In that SAP, the neighborhood, the city, could not come back and do any retroactive rezoning without giving the developer 30 days notice. Remember in prior projects you see where the city had restricted covenants? They could not do any down zoning and make changes. They could not withdraw from the project, and if they did, they'd have to pay back the impact fee of over $1 million per year for 24 years. Does that sound like anything the prior project show? This is the perfect case, and it's showing, I wanted to highlight in this, how yes, there's a framework for it in the Constitution, state law, and how this is a wave of the future, because demand from outside, international demand for a safe ground to invest, and with the using local resources, having an experienced developer, that we're going to see more and more of these projects. Yeah, so basically, if the use fits, there's no rezoning needed. If it's compatible, you just seek permitted use. If it's incompatible and inconsistent, yes, you can have and it advances the public welfare. Yes, you can seek to have it rezoned and all that. Now, here's the litmus test. There's no public hearing. There's nothing like that existing. Why would you give a developer such a blank sheet of paper to do whatever they wanted to do? Because this almost seemed like a de facto rezoning. You're having rezoning without all the other conditions you normally expect. And in this for Brickell, it is within the vision of what the city of Miami saw for the future. And they had a special document. It's called Miami 21. And this is the framework. It would address from fenced empty lots in a depressed area with issues. It lined up with what Miami, the city wanted to see as a destination point for the downtown area. Now, the height, the infrastructure, and so many changes will be not unlike anything, and so they've seen before. But this also lined up with this sense of an international destination, not just New York, not just Hong Kong, not just this. Miami is going to become something like that. Okay, and the vision. The city, the state has a vision, and it's called the SAIL, the Signature Art and Iconic Landscape. You know how when you think of New York, you think of what building? Empire State. The Statue of Liberty. You think of France, what do you think of? The tower, yes. Because they were coming in and they were proposing a project of such a magnitude that it was going to put downtown Miami on the map as a place you want to go that incorporates so many elements. So, but they did have some hearings, but this was all done at the administrative level. You see? Yes, can that be done? Yes, it's supported because they rewrote what they want under the SAP, the Special Area Plan. So if it's consistent, all they had to do was administratively sign off. And if you take a look at the agreement in that SAP, it really ties the hands.
Okay, so let me ask you a question. So are you saying that the approval of the SAP itself was done administratively, or just the approval of developments after the SAP?
Well, what they did, they took what was existing and they took the future view and they sold it to say, we are going to exceed what you had perceived to be done on your future land use. And for the statewide, they showed to the state that this was going to be monumentous.
So there was a land use plan, or there was a, what do they call it in Miami-Dade? Comprehensive master development plan?
Right.
Right, and it exceeded it.
There was an amendment to that?
Yes, they amended that, they amended.
And then they adopted the special area plan?
Yeah, but let me answer that.
Okay.
Part of the Miami 21 code, there's an appendix to it, Appendix E, and that is the SAP for the Brickell. So the Miami 21 code was a process through which this project was approved. So all of the public hearings that were involved with, and not just the Brickell, there's right downtown where Bayside is, and north of that where the design district is, which was part of the vision from the DDA, the Downtown Development Agency. And they're the ones that really influenced Miami 21 to try and change the whole looks, aesthetics, and functionality of downtown to attract tourism and all of that. So the strategy right from day one, once the DDA had the concept, was to try and influence the city of Miami. By the way, the DDA is a part of the city of Miami. It's just an arm of the city of Miami. So they influenced the city of Miami to initiate the process of Miami 21 code. And then the Brickell Center and all the other major developments that are coming was all embedded as an appendix to Miami 21. So that's
Okay,
a
so
process.
each SAP approved becomes an appendix to Miami 21?
They are already.
Each of the individual ones?
Yes,
I mean, if there are additional ones, I guess they would be done in the same way.
exactly right. Because the precedence has been set. Yeah.
So they're writing a new page for themselves in conjunction with the city.
All right, so that brings me to some of the questions that were just asked. Here is the review and approval process just for the Brickell Center, Brickell City Center project. You can see that there are no hearings there. But if we were to click on the Miami 21 public, just click on that link. It's a little bit of a lag. Sorry about this, the computer's a little slow. Let's scroll down. Okay, no. Click on that one. There we go. Scroll down. So this here is a chronology of all of the Miami 21 code hearings and processing. And there were hearings, there were several readings. All of the objections from the public were during the Miami 21 code process. So once that was approved, which included Appendix E for the Brickell Center, the case was closed for Brickell Center.
Okay, it was approved at the same time as Miami 21?
Exactly right. Because Appendix E was part of Miami 21. I think that's a Brickell Center. Okay, so no hearing, hot knife through butter basically for the Brickell Center project, but there were hurdles when Miami 21 was being conceived and processed. Next slide. All right, no, that's good, go back. Again, de facto situation, no public hearings, and there's some references here from Mandelker. Land use controls are clearly delegated home rule power to the legislative home rule states, and local governments have the authority to modify, regulate, and administer zoning matters. So the city of Miami took advantage of that reality. Next slide. There are project records, and all of those links will provide you with a plethora of information. So, and there are hot links. We're not going to go through that to waste time.
I wanted to interject though, that they had, for example, the traffic analysis, and they had so much information. For example, the third button down.
Miami Comprehensive Neighborhood Plan.
Okay. They had on the site where the public can still access and see things, the description and everything. So whoever in the community had a question, Brickell Center individual, the developer, had this site where they could go and have frequently asked questions. So they're being proactive and head off any misunderstandings from individuals who tune in later.
Okay, the 9 acres that was acquired, most of it was acquired by the city of Miami during the time when they were pushing the Miami 21 code through. They knew that this development was coming. The only thing that they didn't know at that time was who would be the developer to take this project on, and they were looking for a very experienced, very deep-pocket, wealthy developer. And I believe that from the records that they looked at several developers and in the end chose Swire. So go to the next slide. So as part of this project analysis, what we have here is Swire basically had all of the basic requirements, the 4 basic elements. We learned this from another course, that you need to have tenants, you need to have land, you need to have knowledge, and you need to have money. And Swire had all of that. And for that reason, they were selected by the city of Miami and executed an agreement, development agreement for the SAP with the city of Miami, and that had terms and conditions, concept drawings, and all of that. We have a link there. If anyone's got a question, we can drill down and show you all of those concept plans that were embedded as part of the Miami 21 Exhibit E, which is for this Brickell Center project. So as you heard from JP earlier on, there's 1.2 billion of capital expenditure. In addition to the land, in addition to impact fees that are being paid, in addition to the economic opportunities and benefits that is being provided for the city of Miami, in addition to the tourist attraction and future developments. There's even an iconic bridge coming in future developments, as well as a mega-story building that is coming as subsequent phases of this particular project. What we're talking about here is phase 1. I'll talk a little bit later on about phase 2 and phase 3 that are coming. And then there are other development outside of the Brickell Center for downtown Miami. So let's go to the next slide. So in summary, and to try and wrap this up, the conceptualization of the Brickell City Center was by the City of Miami and the Downtown Development Authority under the sales proposal, and sale was defined a little earlier on. And the evolution and approval of the Miami 21 included the approval of the BCC, the Brickell City Center, and the impacts of Brickell City Center on the City of Miami and its environments would be immense economically from a tourism standpoint. And go to the next slide, the next one. Thank you. And this is basically what this development looks like. It will be open in early 2016, between December and February. There is a transportation link here, which is a TOD. There's a rail line going down there, the Metro Mover. And that's a station that was existing. It's currently closed because they had to reconstruct that and integrate it right into the shopping center. As a matter of fact, one of the things that the agreement stipulated that in order to minimize congestion during construction, none of the construction workers here could drive their car downtown. They had to park elsewhere at available Metro Move or Metro Rail station and take the public transit system down into the Brickell to minimize congestion. And even with that, there's still congestion.
That didn't work out.
Excuse me?
That didn't work at all, though.
Well, exactly. So this is a phase 1 project on that L-shaped lot that JP showed you earlier on. This will be phase 2, and this will be an 82-story building with a revolving restaurant on the top, which will be iconic. And there will be more commercial development going on here, so that'd be phase 2 here and phase 3 here. And this is phase 1 that we're talking about, the subject of our presentation, which is just about complete. Now, we can show you some live pictures if you want of what's going on today.
Let me interject something. At the start of this project, we walked the site. And even at night, going on into dusk, after hours, it was still so congested. And there are residents in these high rises living in the area. And
I'm one of them.
And I'm thinking to myself, I don't think a project like this, a regular developer coming in to develop a piece of just a lot, could ever get approval for a project that impacts the area so much in terms of traffic, and it get approved. You see what I'm saying? But under a SAP, just like under a PUD, you get to modify and change things. And
You write your own spec.
right. No, the city can go back after all later on in the project, and they see how things are, and put special conditions and down zone and make some changes. But in this particular case, looking over the contract itself, it's so restrictive as to what the community and the city can do, unless it's very egregious and there's enough data. They have enough time, and there is a big penalty that I doubt they're going to be, it's just going to be more difficult for whoever develops in the future. There are going to be more requirements for them. But as far as Brickley is concerned, it got a, what you would say, not a green light, but a golden street.
Okay, so did the city, let me ask a question. Was this city-owned land?
Some of it was, and
Some of it was
Private.
private, right. Matter of fact, the tennis court was not city land. Why don't you go back to the first slide with the red line?
But the city went through.
Yeah, the city owned
selection
these.
process? Okay.
And then they acquired, this is a tennis court, I used to play on that, so I miss it. So they own this, and Swire purchased that. They've since purchased another piece of property here, but that is to deal with future traffic congestion. They're going to be putting a roundabout here, so that will be transportation related. So, but this here is a property for phase 1 development.
Was there any domain involved in that?
Say again?
Was there any domain or?
No, it's all market transaction.
And does Swire acquire the property from the city, or is it like a long-term lease that they're functioning?
This property here, the city bought, which,
No, the main.
no, the city owned this.
Still?
And the city still owns it?
I think they're leasing, long-term lease.
It's a long-term lease?
Yes.
Okay.
It seems like with the city being at least a partial owner, that there was an opportunity for them to impose a lot of exactions and possibly even make them, one example would be give us some money for the metro mover.
Well, and they did.
Give us some money for that parking lot or that
And they did.
circular driveway that you want to build.
And they did. That's all a part of their
That
back
probably had a
fees.
lot to do with, we'll allow this, but we're going to get something we want out of it as well.
Absolutely. That's why the impact fees over many years will be billions.
In fact, in the SAP, it said, the verbiage, is that considering that this was an underused, underdeveloped, fenced off so anybody in posterity look back, they'll say that this was being underutilized and so forth. We agreed to move forward to do this, and it states it, and it builds a strong argument that what you had, what you were doing, this is what we would provide, this is the assurances, this is what we need from you, and this and so forth. These are the things you cannot do unless you do this, and sign away your life.
Any other questions?
Where exactly it's going to be, man? And now.
It is.
Okay, all right, this is 8th Street. Over on the west side here is what's called Little Havana. And over here on the east side 8th Street goes right into what's called Brickell Key, which is a nice little triangle or high-density condominium
So,
development.
Bayside
And,
is just to the
Bayside is
east.
way north.
Oh, over there. Okay.
Way north. And Bayside is one of the DDA designated site for improvement. They have another, not quite as big as Bristol City Center project going on right across from the American Airlines Arena called the Miami World Center. That's going to be another mega project. That's coming now.
Isn't this first of many where they're pushing 60, 70, 80 stories now? That we're
As
gonna
a
see
matter of
a
fact,
whole
right
other-
downtown Brickell, there's an 82-story building going here as phase 2 for Swire. And just south of that, 2 blocks, there's an 85-story building going up, which block in my view, as a matter of fact. I had the big view and no longer will I have that.
And there was an article about FAA approval. They're allowed, they set a limit. They reviewed what was happening, and they set a ceiling as to how high they're allowed to go. But based on the concerns I had too, I made sure I read the details of that SAP agreement, and Swire had this verbiage. Based on the magnitude of the capital, private investment, and so forth, a developer, or it's reasonable to expect that, in a sense, that they wouldn't be subjected to a lot of back and forth and uncertainties. So they needed these special concessions that once this is agreed to, this is going to be what they're limited to, and no changes will be made. So it's not just a regular SAP where you're allowed to do this. There were some restrictions or some covenants there not to go back completely.
It would seem to me that if the city and the government put a lot of funding into it, which clearly did, and there's probably a lot of federal dollars that came through the
And
transportation
DEO
stuff,
as well. DEO
that
sent a lot of money.
At some
to
point,
Canada.
you're committed, and so then the approvals become rubber stamp at that point. Because
Exactly.
it's like, we've already put a ton of money on this.
And that's exactly
We're
what
not
happened.
going to,
And that's exactly what happened with the SAP. That's why
Well,
it was administrative, the process.
The old, I mean, it's the old development of regional impact process, and it still exists in some parts of Florida. One of the benefits, it put tremendous burdens on the developer to study and analyze and mitigate all of their impact. But the upside was a protection from downzoning and a protection of, which normally the local government has the legislative authority. They can change the rules on you at any time because they think it's in the best interest of the public health, safety, and welfare. But the DRI program gave protection from that kind of downzoning, and this SAP, at least this one, I don't know if all
Seal
of
the
them are,
protection.
what seems to adopt that approach to the large development model, that if you want the investment that you seek, city, then you must give up that future right to downzone. And it has, and there's an argument that a promise not to downzone is invalid because local governments, elected officials are not permitted to contract away their legislative duty. But the DRI program in the big context has been upheld, has been the law for a long time, and now the city has incorporated the same sort of structure, it looks like, into the SAP. Now I have to say that there's a guy, Jack Osterholt, who was the planning director. I think he's now the deputy county manager or something like that. But he was previously a DRI guy. He was the executive director of the South Florida Regional Planning Council during the heyday of the DRI program. So I think he at least gets this. But it sounds like a lot of other people in the city do.
Yeah.
So, but it's something to keep in mind when you are contracting, when you're trying to make a deal with a local government. Talk to your lawyer, because if it crosses a certain line, it can be invalidated as an unauthorized contracting away of the legislative duty.
Right.
So, but
They went through all of that here.
yeah, it can be structured properly. So it's
Exactly.
And so we did not spend as much time as to before and after we were allowed, because it was a restrictive commercial zoning. but the result, the subsequent zoning is very it's many parts to it. It's residential, there's commercial, there's
Mixed.
it's mixed use definitely, and so forth. But we had concerns about the legality of how they were doing this, and you definitely picked up on that in terms of do they have the right to make such changes without more public input? But they did it up top, and then they went on.
All right, that's it. Any other questions? Thank you. Take my book out.
I just could change it. They were like, oh, can you change this?
All right, so I guess we'll get started. Good morning, class. Good morning, class.
Good morning.
Thank you. My name is Janae, and here with me are my teammates Laura and Andre, and we're going to present to you our case study on Metropica. If you're not familiar with Metropica, it is located in Sunrise, Florida, and the easiest thing that I can say to you is if you're familiar with Sawgrass Mills Mall, then it's right next to that. As far as the city of Sunrise, it's in Broward County, and it has existing developments like the Sawgrass Mills Mall, and also the BB&T Center, which is right across the street. Not too far is also the, let me make sure I get this name right, Sawgrass International Corporate Park, which is South Florida's largest corporate park. So this is really an area that a lot of companies are coming for business and also retail. In the future, American Express will be bringing their headquarters to Sunrise, Florida, so that's also another big venture. But outside of this, I went to this event that was called Building Broward Together, and they just talked about all the developments that are happening in Fort Lauderdale in general and the city surrounding it. So they talked about places from Hollywood to Sunrise, and a representative there was from the city of Sunrise, and he was just explaining how excited the city was about Metropica coming into it, and how they see this area being Sawgrass Business and Entertainment District, because so much is going to be happening with the additional parts of the mall that they're adding to Sawgrass Mill Mall, and also our Metropica development and American Express headquarters. A lot of that plays into this, so they were just saying that this is really going to be big for business and entertainment. And this is just a view of where Metropica will be right here. This is the city Sunrise, and we just wanted to point it out, like surrounding cities like Plantation, Davie, and Weston. Yeah, 575. So, our Metropica, our location it's right at the corner of 136. Like I said, it's literally right next to Sawgrass Mills Mall off Sunrise Boulevard. And it is 63 acres with 2 acres of park, but we focused on phase 1 and phase 2, which is a 28 parcel. And it was originally zoned for B3, General Business District, and transit-oriented development, but through the rezoning phase, they rezoned it to Planned Development District. So this land use will include residential, office, retail. They want to put in hotel, and also they want to add entertainment aspects. And the landowners are Metropica Holdings.
Okay, so like I mentioned before, this is going to be a planned development district, and it's approximately going to cost about $1.5 billion over a 10-year period. The type of development this is going to be is higher end. So for the hotel, I was reading like the hotel's going to be over here, and entertainment right here. So for the hotel, they wanted to add a 5-star resort, and they want to bring in iPix theater. So this is really going to be higher end, like retail and office space, as well as, you know, areas for hotel. And just to give you the specifics, as you can see, there's going to be about 1,250 high-rise units, 485,000 square feet of commercial space, and 150,000 square feet of office space. And right now, I'm going to hand it off to Laura so she can talk more in detail about the zoning.
Okay, so this was the existing zoning district in Sunrise. This is where Metropolis is going to be, phase 1 and 2. It was the business district. The brown is, this is a PUD already there. The green is recreational, and I is industrial, and that's it. Well,
Where, you mentioned the TOD, that some of it was rezoned from TOD to.
it had a future development. It's called a, it was B3 business district with a future land use designation of transient oriented development, the TOD.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay, so for the rezoning, like we said, from B3 and TOD, they applied for a PDD, Planning Development District. And the reasons why they needed this rezoning was to develop a mixed residential commercial project, maximize the transit-oriented efficiency, and they wanted to make it a more pedestrian and, you know, the transit and walkability, urbanized development. So, and also they had to enhance the connectivity between the commercial, residential, and the hotel. So, in order to do that, they couldn't do it in a business district because it's going to be like a small city within a city. So, it needed to have, you know, to change the zoning in order to accomplish that. And it was approved in May 2014. Now, we went through the code, the Sunrise code, and we found the PDD codes. In order for the entire project, you know, for a PDD to be approved, it has to be allowed by the comprehensive plan, which it was. Then the density had to be a maximum allowed by the adopted future land use map, which it was. And then the combining uses, they had to be compatible with the location uses within itself. So, you know, everything was, but everything went and was approved through the code, and it definitely met every single one of these. The next part of the code talked about how it had to be consistent with the city plan as a whole, and it did, and also that the applicant for the PDD had to be the owner of the entire land proposed for the PDD, and it was approved for that. And then,
so there were a couple of concerns during the process at the City of Sunrise Planning and Zoning Advisory Board meeting on May 29th. Mrs. Hoare made mention of the impact of small business owners from the traffic that the project will bring. Also, Mr. Lindsay mentioned the saturation. He's a resident of the Sawgrass Preserve. And Mr. Asilan mentioned that we'd like to have a stoplight put in at the Sawgrass Preserve to mitigate the traffic. Some negative economic impacts. This would project will generate an average potable water demand of 0.9 million gallons per day. It will require an average wastewater demand of 0.67 million gallons per day, generating approximately 19 tons of solid waste, generating an average daily demand of approximately 95,000 kilowatts of electrical energy, and generate 2,500 new peak hour traffic trips. Some positive economic impact: it will create a total of 1,500 jobs, 900 of which will be permanent, and at an estimated 750 million in annual disposable income throughout the South Florida area, and provide more than 130 million in value added to the South Florida region, and generate an estimated 3.2 million in annual added value taxes to the city of Sunrise, and 3.2 million to Broward County. In conclusion, the parcel of land proposed for the Metropical development was originally zoned B3 development business district, which did not comply with the developer's plan. They rezoned the land to a planned development district, which helped them to put together the commercial and residential mix that they were looking for, and promote pedestrian and transit connectivity. And this was in compliance with the city's comprehensive plan.
So overall, this is going to be like a huge development. It's going to basically be a city within a city. We're trying to go for like the urban feel in suburbia. I'm not sure how you all feel about that, but personally, me, I like the idea of still being in a suburban setting, but still having an urban feel. Like as a young person, that's something I would look for, especially if I was to work at one of these companies or this corporate headquarters that are coming in. I think it's a pretty cool idea.
Can you bring up the slide on the rezoning, on the PDD criteria and the rezoning criteria?
Wait, that is the rate. It's time.
This one?
Yeah.
Or the one before? Yeah, that's it. Oh, that's pretty.
So, did those criteria really contemplate discussing the economic benefits of the project? Like, was a positive economic impact something that was on the official rezoning criteria? That you
No, I don't
wasn't-
remember there was anything about the economic. There was a lot of information about the streets, the traffic, easements, things that had to do with getting people in and out of the area, going into Sawgrass, and having the Sawgrass Expressway there. And just more, it was more about density, more about where are all these people gonna go, and traffic.
Well, what do you think about, should a local government consider, and when they're making a rezoning or a future land use decision, what the bottom line is going to be to their tax base?
Yes.
Of course.
Oh, yes.
Then why isn't it in any of the criteria? They have public health, safety, welfare criteria, but not, your project has to show positive tax movement, and yet it's like the unstated benefit that they're all really looking for.
Wouldn't
as the elected officials.
Wouldn't that be steering the developer, or?
Is that really, the local government adopts a budget and they set the millage rate apply it to the assessed value to generate the amount of money they're gonna have to spend, and then they spend it according to their budget. If the land is developed in a way that generates less tax revenue, it means they have less to spend in their budget, but not really. They can, up to their maximum millage rate, increase the millage rate and still get the same amount of money. I guess my question is that the local government is the regulator here, but they're almost participating as a market participant also. And it's like the unspoken criteria. It's not one of the legislative reasons they are generally, you know, they would generally act pursuant to. I'm using poor grammar, go ahead.
I had that's a similar thing I was picking up on. It says if so much development was going on and the city and the planners haven't really caught up with the impact they're having on their budget. I think just like we have to amend the comprehensive master plan to accommodate something, they're going to have to revisit the economic plan, their budgetary concerns, because they haven't really caught up. It's like you have technology moving ahead and they're still using typewriters.
Okay, so if a project, if what is proposed, let's say the 6 acre parcel that you guys did, what if what came in there was a giant not-for-profit that was gonna take all the land off the tax roll? Do you think that would be a basis to deny it?
No,
Yes.
You think it would be a good
I
basis
don't.
to deny it? Somebody,
Take care of. It wouldn't be, but
it, go ahead.
So I work in property tax, that's what I do full time. What a lot of counties do is if they also work with the assessment of the value of property. So you might notice the value of your house just jump up, and it's like, oh, well, our millage rates are low, but you guys raise the value of all the property in the county to kind of adjust.
But of course,
that.
that's a different branch of government.
Yeah, but they still work together, right? It's politics.
Well, I don't know. I mean, the property appraiser will say, don't blame me for your millage rate.
Right,
All
exactly.
I'm doing is setting the value. And the local government says, don't blame us for your ultimate taxes because it's based on the assessed value so they, work together? I don't know.
They sit in the same building down the hall from each other.
Well, that they do, yes, that they do.
I would think it would be illegal for a zoning body to require a certain tax level because it doesn't fall within, health, safety, public welfare, and morals.
Right.
There's no nexus for them to be able to.
And yet we see that it clearly influences them in their decision making.
Oh,
Yeah.
I mean, the first time that I encountered it in a project where they required an analysis, it's like, show us how much what the value of your total development will be, and calculate the tax. And that was a criteria, and it was nowhere in their adopted criteria. But they required it, they required the information, and they debated it much more than they debated the other traditional health, safety, and welfare things. So it's an interesting, as local government becomes more sophisticated, I think we're gonna see even more of it.
That happened in Miami.
That was, they
That
were,
happened in the Brickell project.
it was show me the money, huh?
That's it.
Tula?
So you're saying, by the same token, they would also deny, would they be able to deny on the basis that it would be taken off the tax rolls?
It's a question, and you see it sometimes with religious land uses. I mean, there's a federal law, and we'll cover it, at some point. There's a federal law that protects religious land uses from discrimination in that regard, but it comes into play with not-for-profit land uses, and religious land uses are one of them, that the city doesn't want to permit churches on this commercial street where their planned budget contemplates valuable commercial development going in there. And the federal statute says,
Can't do that.
you can't discriminate against religious land use on that basis. but it kind of reveals the motivations behind some of these decisions.
And if you look at these mega projects and the mixed use and the prices involved, the people who are gonna be cleaning those hotels and maintaining and taking, where are they gonna live? We see nice highways and freeways and so forth. I'm still concerned that I do not see enough provision, enough being done to make sure that people who are at a certain level can afford to be in the proximity.
Yeah.
But
Was there
to argue
any
against
affordable
that,
housing
you know,
aspect to this project? Oops, sorry, just a minute.
No.
I was gonna say, but to argue against that, you know, from their perspective, if you build an affordable housing place, you don't get as much tax out of it. They're capped, you know, at a certain amount, and so the taxes will then be further reduced. So their incentive is the exact opposite, to not allow affordable housing because that's a higher tax base.
Well, like in the case of Brickell, just 3 blocks away, there's a whole plethora of affordable homes and rental facilities. And even in the Brickell project, there is an apartment complex that, in order for them to keep the price within reason for where it fits into the unaffordable range, they only have like 700-800 square foot in those apartments. And they've already done their market analysis and they're gone. See, so I think there are ways and means to make those accommodations, and also that is happening in my area.
Yes, I'm also, not to belabor the point, but states do look at other states and things that they've adopted that work should be visited. For example, in California, San Francisco, housing prices per square foot is very high. And even projects being done now, huge projects, they're the requirement, and they're not isolating and building affordable or subsidized housing. No, they're integrating them, they're within, they're being built in. It's just special financing and so forth that will allow somebody making $60,000 or $50,000 to be able to live in proximity to where they work.
Okay, and then we'll finish up, you guys, and get down to next.
In Cooper City, talking about what she's saying about affordable housing, I forget the name of it, Montera, that's what it's called. Montera in Cooper City, there's an affordable housing apartment building area, and then right behind it, there are homes, they're single family homes. So they did, I don't know if it was part of the city or maybe the plan, but they did affordable housing, and they included that in the project. It's called the same, it's Montera, both of them are Montera, the houses and the affordable apartment buildings. And I know because I try going in there, they're like, no, you make too much money. Yeah.
So discrimination the other way.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, affordable housing is tricky too, because when it's rental housing, and let's say some percentage of the units, it's somewhat easy to control and easy to manage because it's all under one ownership. But when housing is for sale housing that's intended to be affordable, it's challenging. So someone buys an affordable home, and let's say that it is community supported to get it to the price that they can afford, and then it appreciates, as one hopes all property will appreciate. Who gets the benefit of the appreciation? How long is the restriction in place? How much, if the person holds it for 10 years and it appreciates, do they get to sell and take all the appreciation? Or does some of it need to go back into the community pot that was the underwriting for the price support to begin with? Those are tough things, and tough things to administer.
Have you heard of land trusts, ma'am? So that kind of gets at what you're talking about, is that the housing project gets put into the land trust. The land actually goes to this trust in the community, and so even if the value of the building, which is what the resident owns, increases, it's a smaller percentage than the land, and the land can always then be repurposed, continuously repurposed for affordable housing. It prevents from cashing out, because that happens a lot up in Maryland. I remember people were cashing out, appreciating $150,000, that the property was bought for $100,000, and it's like, and they appreciated more than the property was even sold to them, for as an affordable housing. So
Just a
quick question. All these companies that are supposedly moving down to Florida, is that like real or is it happening? Because I know they've been talking about it, but I didn't know if it's actually been happening.
Yeah, no, it's actually happening.
actually happening, okay, that's all.
I know for sure American Express, and
Yeah.
then it's right, I forgot the name of the company, but it's, I think they're.
I know Hertz and Fort Myers started moving.
Yeah, like apartment complexes, but also at the building Broward Together, they were talking about how, you know, Fort Lauderdale is becoming so much more appeasing because they're trying to add the whole metropolitan feel, like the bigger feel, kind of not trying to do what Miami does, but just on a little bit of a smaller scale. Like, we still have a really big downtown area with a lot of businesses, banking, and things of that nature. So we are appealing to people. It's just now, especially in these outside cities besides Fort Lauderdale, like they're starting to come in the suburban areas where there is land. So that's what I got me out of there and what I'm finding.
Yeah, when you
Yeah,
see
no, it's
that,
real.
so I was wondering, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thanks.
Yeah, no problem.
All right, next.
Thank you.
We're missing Quincy. He had a car accident on his way here, so.
You okay?
It's the two of us. I don't know, did you spoke to
He said he was
him?
fine, but you go into much detail.
Did they close out PowerPoint?
Someone left their disc in here as well.
Mine is still there,
Yeah,
mine
that's
is still there. So you can just use one of the other slides.
Want to just show the whole screen?
For the slideshow.
Slideshow?
Next to the report.
Yeah.
I'll begin.
That's better. Okay, it's the South Broward Hospital District that we are doing a study on, and the rezoning of the adjacent areas. And this is Jeff Hard. My name is Tula Mana, and we're hoping that Quincy is okay. This is the rezoning of the surrounding areas from office and single family into HD, which is hospital district. So this was Memorial Hospital is in 1953. West of I-95, there was nothing built there. It was considered the Everglades, and they were wondering why did they go that far west to build a hospital. It was, the main hospital parcel was 20 acres at the time, and it had 100 beds, and that was it. It was the boondocks. So in 1992, many years ago, because a lot of planning went into this, there was a resolution that was put in place that limited building on the surrounding areas of the hospital. There were some offices across the street from the hospital that housed doctors' offices mainly, and the residents were very, very concerned that the hospital was expanding in an undesirable way that would bring their property values down. So the resolution was passed that set a limitation to the height of those office buildings, no more than 2 floors. Now, that resolution had an expiration date of December 31st in 2005. That resolution also resulted in clearly defining the surrounding areas to the east to have a zoning of Office 1, which is a light office zoning, and then on the south, residential 6, single family. Now, this was the residential on the bottom, and this was the office, and the main hospital area was there, the 20 acres that were there originally. So, in February 2007, this was about a year and 1 month after the 1992 resolution expired. Therefore, at that time, the sky was the limit. So that's when a move was made by the South Broward Hospital District, and what they did was they entered into an agreement with the city, an interlocal agreement under which they were studying the rezoning of those adjacent lots and to basically build what they needed at the time, which was the Joe DiMaggio Children's Hospital, and also additional surgical areas, some more parking lots, and therefore they started discussing the different phases of development, because this was not built all in once, what exactly was going to be put in where, maximum allowed, and also, of course, mitigate the impact of the development in terms of traffic and utilities. Okay, so May 2007, the staff report had details and addressing all the issues, and of course a lot of public meetings were made throughout. They had to notify the public of their intention to change the zoning on surrounding parcels in order to allow those facilities that were higher than the existing buildings and for which the residents were very much concerned. So again, the eastern side and the south side. Okay, this is an interesting matter. LEED certification, every time the city now, a major developer approaches the city, they will ask, are you doing LEED? They're trying to encouraging it. In this case, they specifically asked for a LEED certification, but then it was shown that it was not really required, so not a necessity at the time. Now, the height of the buildings, since the resolution of 1992 expired, it was no longer required to upkeep with that resolution. So, they proceeded to traffic study. So, the bottom line is that it was that the rezoning from light office and residential into a hospital district was consistent with the comprehensive plan, and it was based on the following, that since the office and the residential land use area was already, the main element was to promote the distribution of land uses to enhance and improve the residential, business, resort, and natural communities, while allowing landowners to maximize the use of the property. So, in case of the light office, that's the next slide. Prior to that. Okay, so the light office actually was consistent because of the permitted uses of the current land designation. So they had the same use. So the hospital district rezoning was consistent with the light office at that time, and the residential zoning, they were also deemed consistent with that because it contained the community facilities use. Community facilities is parks, it's other buildings that serve the public of every nature. Therefore, a hospital serves the public, so therefore the use was the same. On that basis of consistency, then the hospital district zoning was deemed to be the same and consistent with those two types of zoning. So therefore, they approved it based on that. And there's the map prior to that. And this is where Jeff will take over to explain those two areas and this area here and how
Yeah,
to put it together.
before I get into the map, because I want to spend some time on the site plan, this diagram and rendering explains it pretty well. But before I get into that, I want to go back over the criteria that were met, and then we're going to look at some that were not met as well. As she mentioned, the plan was approved, and because it was consistent with the comprehensive plan. Also, the use permitted will be in the proposed district classification and in the interest of the general public. Development will be consistent in scale with the other buildings at the existing hospital. Not consistent with the neighborhood next door, because that's a lot of what's driving this. You have a neighborhood next to a large hospital complex. Naturally, you have single family sitting next to structures that are commercial in nature, and proposed garages up to 8 stories. So naturally, you've got some height differentiation and some concerns. But getting back to the criteria, change will not adversely influence living conditions, consistent with public safety concerns, will not create traffic hazards, property values will not be adversely affected overall, and no other adequate sites are appropriate or are presently zoned for this use. Some of the criteria that were not met: there was not a conflicting use designation. As I said before, it was concurrent, or it did go with the planned out land uses. The district, another one is the district was isolated to adjacent or nearby districts. What we mean by that, the hospital district was on a large parcel of land, and they owned a road between the two. So they were moving across the street where there was light office and some residential. By owning the land and moving all over at once, they were keeping it all as one. So there was not an adjacent district nearby that it was in conflict with.
And the reason this is so important is because they wanted to avoid any connection to a variance. They were not asking for a variance, they were not asking for anything different, and they want to emphasize that consistency with the existing zoning in the master plan. So based on that, they didn't really seek public approval. They only did it on a social basis, and that they wouldn't have much opposition. But the fact is, the zoning was so consistent, and they wanted to show that no variance or exclusions were applicable, that basically this made it extremely easy. This is something that may be happening shortly with Nova University and Rolling Hills on University Drive. When they purchased that from the town of Davie, they had a 10-year expiration that area will remain untouched and be used as a golf course. So we might see great things happening there too. A very similar situation. The developers see far in advance. Sometimes those restrictions are put in place to appease surrounding residents, and they have an expiration date, and that's extremely interesting. And even if there's not one, everybody should have one in certain occasions to allow the people to think that they're going to have their living conditions as they love them today, and then in another 13 years, as it happened here, the sky became the limit, basically, and all barriers were removed in a way.
Let me give you a brief overview. Over here you have a large residential neighborhood. 1-story buildings, 2-story buildings. What you see in the peach color here is the existing site. All the blue stuff is the expansion, the improvements. So let me run you through some of them. 4-story cancer center, right here, with a 4-story parking garage on the back of it. A 4-story parking garage here as well, but with a proposal to go up to 8 stories in the future. You can imagine an 8-story parking garage parked right up next to your backyard.
Isn't that, Joe DiMaggio, isn't that the new children's hospital?
This one right here?
Yeah. That's not part.
Sorry, this is the 4-story parking garage. This is the office building that the parking serves this office. This is the 8-story. I have this as an 8-story expansion.
It is.
Well, a 4-story children's hospital, but with 4 stories to expand. A 3-story energy plant to serve the future needs of the whole site. Over here, 6-story garage as well, and you've got residential on this side. You've got residential surrounding the area, except for this street, the main road that divides it. And an 8-story patient tower right here. So there's some other aspects in the middle, but this was kind of adding on floors and expanding what they had already built. So as you can see, they have a lot proposed. Here's the road I mentioned before that cut between the 2 properties with pedestrian bridges leading over. So what was here before was light office and single family. So they jumped across the street. That's a brief of the site plan itself. I'll take it. Tula, you go back over.
Well, this is what I said before, that the residents' concerns were addressed, and they were invited, and a lot of them voiced concerns, but since everything was permitted again, they just were seeking community support for the project. So the hospital, of course, gave a lot back to the city in terms of infrastructure. And also they, apart from the increase in the total number of beds, also they threw into the local residents, the Hollywood residents will have dedicated 1,000 jobs out of 4,000 exclusive to them. But definitely, and that was the central idea, it was a very simple, that it was consistent with the city's comprehensive plan of future land use. You want the question after
Yes.
that? Yes.
Is it a for-profit hospital, or is it, what is the status? Is it a for or a non-profit? Is it public? Oh, okay.
So that's actually what happened 13 years earlier, not 15. I'm sorry about the mistake. But basically, it was just a realignment with all the zoning districts into one. That's it.
No, that's not it.
The next slide is good.
So, one of the existing zoning regulations, well, the existing zoning regulations did not specify specific development criteria. One of them was setbacks. They had it said in the old agreements that setbacks will be determined by the director of office planning, based upon the setbacks in the adjacent zoning districts. So there was a little leeway. But as you're trying to push this development, do you think that you're going to be able to just minimize and come across, well, I'm not going to do any setbacks or any. So they came at it with a progressive attitude. These are our proposed zoning criteria. We're not opposed to setbacks. They set up regulations with required setbacks. On top of that, specific buffer yard designs, height restrictions, and site design specifications. So we're going to allow the progress, but we're going to nail down some criteria to where we can know what we're dealing with. This is a rendering of the neighborhood to the side. This is a landscape buffer with a 35-foot setback. This is the 4-story and up to 8-story parking, 4-story parking garage that I mentioned. So you'll see this a lot. Landscape buffers come in, line the parking garages with palms, high-density landscaping to buffer the residents from that. Create an alleyway, put in a sidewalk, and this becomes the fabric that these people are going to have to live with.
That was
So, you know,
absolutely awful.
What about property value?
So, you know, if you remember the original picture of the hospital, you basically had one building in, what, 1953. This is the future expansion of the whole entire complex. This is where they jumped across the road and started building the parking garages and the office decks and the energy plant. So this is just to give you a feel for where we were, where we started with the little one building that looked like a hotel, to this. So this is where we started, and we ended up with that. You know, and this is all in regards to future use of the land and for the community. What's the better of it? Is it better for the community? And our analysis was yes. I mean, we have the need. So this is what you'll find today. Can you go back one slide, actually? I wanted to show the lots. This was the existing,
Which one?
the one there, the one you had. This was the existing site, and then they jumped across the road. So these are the residential lots. So this was showing that this was office, and then you have a little sliver here. It was low density residential. So that's the rezoning aspect of the project. They went and rezoned this area so they could put larger commercial projects to support the expansion.
I have a question about that specific slide. How did they, because obviously they don't have, they're not a government entity per se, they're still.
They are.
Are they authorized to do condemnation?
Yes.
So they did takings on these?
They had, unless you guys know, they had acquired the land that was planned for the Children's Hospital and the Cancer Center hasn't been built yet, was acquired by the district. That had already been acquired by the district, and then they have an office building up above it, north of it, for doctors' office. They had been built as doctors' offices, and they had been acquired over time. They did do some condemnation to get rid of the tenants.
So if I live in all those residential areas, are they currently suing the government for property value? What is it, inverse condemnation, where it's like, you've ruined my property value by building this.
Yeah, I mean, the landscaping probably didn't appease them too much.
So I was just wondering, are there currently lawsuits from that residential area regarding?
I didn't dig in, we didn't have so much dig into what the current state is right now. You know, as far as what litigation going on right now.
Well,
landowners.
Disclosure here, I did this, the entitlement of this project.
And actually, these residences here did lose value, but there was a very small number. And the ones that were further east were not affected, is what the study showed.
I mean, affected in a small regard because there's going to be parking issues, not parking, traffic circulation in the future. I mean, you're going to all these people pulling out of this road now, taking a left, and this guy's trying to take a right.
And on the positive side, any type of such expansion and the end result, I mean, it gives value to further residential in the area. It's not all bad. It's just the immediate.
By the time, and I'll just kick in here, by the time we got to the final zoning hearings, the hospital owned like all but one adjacent house. And on some of those blocks, they owned 3D of the houses. So they were acquiring the
Land banking.
they used it. I mean, they actually housed staff, doctors and nurses and so on, there because there was a need for that. So they, you know, and there was a bit of a battle over paying at what point in time the value would be determined. You know, before the project, after the project, before the downturn, after the downturn. There was tremendous interest again by the city in seeing the project move forward, not because it was going to add to the tax base, because it wasn't, but it was going to be a job creator at a very down point in the economy. So, I'm trying to remember what's been built. I think that Joe DiMaggio and the power plant's the only thing that's been built. Maybe this infill. I think that this was built
The
too.
surgical.
In here? Yeah.
So,
This was constructed? Okay. I didn't
Surgical.
realize.
I have a question. If the hospital is willing to buy the adjacent lots 3D, in my mind, it would make more sense to destroy them and turn it into a park. And that would give them a little bit more standoff. Plus, if they do need to expand again, they don't have to worry about condemning new properties.
Let me tell you about that. The district proposed a park.
Yeah, so that makes
And
sense.
the city did not want a park. I mean, the residents didn't want a park because those disruptive young people would come with their skateboards and bother the peace of their neighborhood. So it was very contentious because the folks who owned their homes in that neighborhood for a long time, you know, felt that this was growing much larger than anyone had contemplated when they bought their homes. So it got pretty ugly. The hearings, we had 2 zoning hearings that went until 3 o'clock in the morning on these. And those were the longest zoning hearings I have yet in my career sat through. And yet at the same time, the doctors at Joe DiMaggio Children's Hospital stayed until 3 o'clock in the morning to have an opportunity to testify about the need of the facility. So it was a very interesting process. Anyway, so I didn't mean to hijack your presentation.
And I think it's interesting, you know, the administration that went to get the project and make it happen. A lot of work there, but do you think this landscape buffer and this alleyway and this small little concrete wall to absorb some noise and some visibility, do you think that really appeased the residents much? I mean, no, I don't think so.